So Karan asks, should I learn Kotlin? So here's my basic answer, Karan. So 2 years ago when I was first looking at Kotlin, Kotlin was in a state where there was not many resources whatsoever. There was not many APIs which had been integrated. It was before Google, or actually I think when I made that video it was exactly when Google had announced support for Kotlin. I don't remember exactly. And I was looking at Kotlin from a perspective of being a somewhat seasoned Java developer, not an expert, but you know, I was pretty good with Java. And so to kind of give my same, to weigh things again for you now in approaching 2019, Kotlin is rapidly growing in popularity. Coroutines are insanely useful. I could talk a lot, but let me just show you why you probably want to consider switching to Kotlin. Just give me a moment to pull up some resources. In terms of coroutines, coroutines is one of the main things where you should seriously consider switching to Kotlin. What project is this called? Kotlin MVP. So this is something that my Java developers who are watching will be able to appreciate as well. So I'm going to open up first the master branch of this Kotlin calculator application. I'm going to go to view, or wait, where am I going? Come on, brain, you can do this. What am I going to show? Not view, let's go to the presenter. So I'm going to open up the same file in the master branch and the coroutine branch. So in the master branch, my presenter is implemented with RxJava, which uses what is called continuation passing style, which is a big fancy word for callbacks. So what I'll show you first is what that looks like in with RxJava used in Kotlin. So whether you're working in Kotlin or not, I'm sure if you've ever heard of RxJava, you are pretty familiar with seeing this kind of thing. And let me tell you, it's pretty ugly. It works if you can understand it, but you know, to have to basically fill your applications with all of this stuff, it's complicated, it's difficult to teach, and it's just really ugly to look at, to be honest. So this is, I want you to note two things. This function is called onEvaluateClick, and it calls a use case called evaluate, and it calls execute on that use case. So I want you to just in your mind, look at this, and then let's see this exact same method written with Kotlin in coroutines. On evaluate, where is it? On evaluate click. Okay, sorry, I delegate to evaluate expression. This is it. So we're calling eval.execute. We're calling this. Okay. And then because it's a coroutine, and it's a launch coroutine specifically, it's going to wait for all of that asynchronous code to do what it needs to do. And then I can actually write okay, with coroutines I can write asynchronous code in direct sequential style if I want to. That gets rid of callbacks. So this thing here, this is called continuation passing style. It's when you use callbacks. Under the hood, coroutines do still use this, but as far as the developer is concerned, we can get away with writing beautiful code like this. So I'm going to pull up Space Notes, which is a more advanced sample, and I'm going to open up a logic class. And so this is a more complicated application, but I want to point out when I execute asynchronous operations because of coroutines, I can write them in what's called direct style. Wait for the result, check the state of the result, so I don't actually need whatever they're called. I don't need on error or on complete or on next. I don't need my event streams to be represented that way. I can actually just, this is partly true in RxJava, and it's probably how you want to use RxJava, but I can just return some result object which is capable of representing whatever state. So it can represent a success state, it can represent an error state, it can do whatever. Also a loading state is often useful. So, and this isn't even my final form. This isn't even the finished product here. This is about maybe 75% of where I want this application to be. So there's a lot of other really useful things about Kotlin. So for example, just to give you a bit of a showcase, there's this principle in coding. Let me pull the thing up first here before I go rambling. So I'm going to open up a file called dataext.kt. So there's a principle in building programs called the open-closed principle. I don't have time to summarize it for you today, but the basic gist of it is it's how you build applications that can be changed without breaking. That's really useful. In Java and classic OOP languages, except for C#, I believe, which has extension functions, maybe I mixed that up, the only way to kind of do the open-closed principle, it's one of the solid principles, is via abstraction. Whereas with Kotlin and languages that can use extension functions, we can have functions. In this case, these are properties. Some of them are functions. And I know this is Klingon to a lot of people watching this, but suffice it to say, we can have functions, and even, for lack of a better term, they're called extension properties, but you can kind of think of them as like variables. We can define them in external files without changing the existing sources themselves. That is exactly the point of the open-closed principle. Sources should be closed for modification, open for extension, and extension functions allow you to do things like get rid of every utility class you've ever written and just put them in some random file I happen to call dataext.kt. I don't need a class. I literally just define these things, and when I want to use, for example, this mapper function here, so this is note.toRoomNote. Let's go into the private note source. So, actually no, let's go into the implementation. Oh, wrong one, of course. 50-50 chance, and I got it wrong. That is still not the right one. What am I doing here? Room, where's room? There we go, sorry. I've got 3 data sources and I'm confusing myself. Okay, so for example, as you can see, just really quickly, so in order to, one of the things I've done in Space Notes is I don't want any room annotations or Firebase crap in my domain layer. That's not acceptable. So that necessitates having a separate data model class for each backend data source that requires it. So as you can see, I have a room note, and in the domain layer, I have just a note. With no APIs, it's just plain Kotlin. So naturally, that means I need to map to and from these particular things. So when I need to do, how I did that is I define, where is my extension function class? I define the mapping operations as extension properties, similar to extension functions. So just note, this one is called room.toNote. This one is called, sorry, roomNote.toNote. This one is note.toRoomNote. And it just is a simple mapping operation. And when I want to actually use that, all I have to do is once again find the file. Eventually I'll get there. There we go. I just call toNote or toRoomNote in this separate file. I don't need to bloat this thing with a whole bunch of mapping logic or anything quite like that. So I showed you coroutines and extensions, but there's plenty of other benefits to working in Kotlin. One of the biggest benefits is that you will build your applications way faster than you can build in Java, probably about 40% faster. That is not a trivial amount. Yeah, maybe some... We're going to see where Kotlin goes for JavaScript support and multi-platform support. I'm going to be testing that out personally soon, so that might be another hang-up potentially, but at this point, I'm not actually going to tell anyone that they should learn Java over Kotlin. I'm not going to say anything specific there, because if you do learn the basics of Java, it's going to help you in Kotlin, but you're still going to have to learn all of the really annoying stuff that you have to deal with in Java, and that's quite unfortunate. So for new developers, what would I basically say? If you want to really master Kotlin, it's probably necessary for you to understand a good amount of Java. But if you want to be building applications in Kotlin, on Android particularly, I really do think that's the way to go. So, if you have questions about Android, Kotlin, software architecture, or just programming in general, then leave me a question down below and I might just get back to you in the next video. If you enjoyed this content, do me a favor and hit the like button down below. Consider subscribing, following me on your preferred social media platforms, and even throwing me a couple bucks on PayPal or Patreon. Links in the description box below. Thanks for watching and peace out.